And we are live. My name is Dave. I will be your host for today's event, which is very exciting. We have Nikon in the house who are doing a long lens event, which we're very excited about. There is a ton of glass over there. Some of them are worth $5 or $10 at least. This event is sponsored by Nikon, of course. And before we get going into that, there is a bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes here. We have Jeff manning a camera back there. Drew is looking after all the wired stuff over there, making sure this live stream goes off without a hitch. And it's great that we can do a live stream online. We also have an in-person audience, which is great and somewhat intimidating at the same time. Even though I know most of you by name, it's pretty good. But part of what I like is being able to interact with everybody here. The in-person audience, we're going to do question and answers after the fact. We're going to get through as many questions as answers as we can from the live audience. I will be monitoring the chat as well as my email. If you don't want to participate in the chat, just email me. It's just dave@thecamerastore.com. And you guys too. If you guys want to email me, a bit bored, a little lonely sometimes, catch on. If you don't already know our guest already, Nikon Ambassador Jenny Wong has a colorful portfolio. Her work ranges from tourism and brands within Canada and abroad to conservation and science communication, best known for her work with polar bears, I'm looking forward to this, and all things Arctic. She's come a long way from the first D90 that she has. All right, Jenny, thank you so much for joining us today. What do we expect today?
Well, you know what? There's not much I can teach you guys in 45 minutes, I think, that has to do with the camera and editing that you can't learn online. So today we'll definitely be more focused on all the other things that I've kind of learned along the way of how did I get where I am today, and particularly things that people don't talk about from mental health, of dealing with the industry, community. So how are you going to network to get yourself seen, and how to apply skills that you have. Like there's engineers, I'm assuming, in the room, there's accountants, there's people with science backgrounds. How do you apply those things and summon everything that you have into photography? Because it's way more than just the images that you take to create a career.
Great. All right, we'll let you have at her, and we'll catch up in a bit.
Okay. So, a little bit about me. I didn't start off as picking up a camera and, waking up and being like, I want to be a photographer, and this is my career. I know a lot of photographers are like that, and they say, I was born to do this. But for me, I was an adventurer. I was a traveler. I was a fixer for trips. People would ask me to stand in their photos to be a little human. Eventually, they taught me how to take photos, and I had a camera. So it was a paperweight, and it became kind of a traveling companion. So by 2019, I was starting my own assignments. I was participating partially with my friends' assignments, but starting to get my own. I ended up getting my first big Arctic one. I did a 400-kilometer commute from Clyde River to Pond Inlet via snowmobile, and that kind of kickstarted some other stuff. Through it, I developed more skills. So it started with landscape and adventure, developing into wildlife, astro, whatever you need. A lot of people talk about niching in, and I think it's great to niche your brand, decide who you want to show your images to, decide on a demographic, but never niche your skills. Always try to expand your skills, become better at what you do. You might be a landscape artist, you might be a wildlife photographer, whatever it is, but what's stopping you from learning astro and learning how to do better portraits? When I'm doing wildlife, when I'm doing brand endorsements, when I'm doing even BTS stuff, I need to be able to take a portrait of somebody. If I'm telling a story, it's not just all bear photos. Sometimes it's scientist photos, editorial pictures, community pictures, landscapes, all of it. So think of it more as an all-inclusive package of, you might be a wildlife photographer, this might be your topic of interest, but you're gonna have to learn other skills to kind of get into expanding that business for yourself. And that kind of leads into one of the best advice that I got from a lot of my friends was brand evolution and who you are as a photographer. They can literally copy everything. I mean, making pretty is pretty easy, I think, nowadays. These cameras are super advanced. people can copy your style, they can comp stomp you, go to your locations, buy all the same gear as you, but who you are as a photographer, if you think of your favorite photographer and the images that they take are, can you do it? You can. You can make the exact same photo that they did given the same opportunities. But it's not a Paul Nicklin, it's not a MIDI, it's not an Ami Vitali. It's who they are, it's a brand, it's something that comes through in their image that is intangible. Like who you are as a photographer will come through in your work, and that they cannot take from you. When you're talking about AI and everything that's coming out, I think that's really important to recognize where your value is. And finding that, I think is really, some people are lost on that, and I think read. I always say, read more about the things that you love, what you're framing, be passionate about what you frame. For me, that's what got me into photography, was falling in love with what is within the frame instead of the tool that I'm holding. And the sensitivity of how you tell a story. For me, something like this is a hunting shot in the high Arctic. If you've seen a lot of hunting shots, it's unrelatable because I think there's a person that you're photographing, right? And these are my friends that allow me to take the shot. And then there's the people that are going to be viewing it who buy their food wrapped in plastic. They likely have never seen an animal shot or hunted or anything. And to give sensitivity and fairness in the story and the voice, I need to understand how someone's going to react to my shot. Do I want to sensationalize it so that people react in a way where it's a tabloid headline, or do I want to give a fair chance to my friend and his voice? And to me, I chose sensitivity to my friend, right? I think it's less grotesque in the sense of how someone's going to actually react that doesn't hunt, that doesn't rely on their land for food. And it's more artistic. I think it shows a more intimate side of subsistence for Indigenous communities. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that I love about my job. There's a lot of things I don't love about my job. Particularly, I'm pretty shy, so doing something like this is actually really hard for me. But also like being in front of the camera and being a representative of what I believe in as myself as a brand and who I work with is also very important. It carries through when I talk about branding. The brands I want to work with, the conservation groups that I want to work with, even the tourism groups that I want to work with. So which outfitters am I going to go? I don't want someone to come back and say that was unethical and then me blaming my guides that, oh, they allowed me to do it and so therefore I'm going to do it. So I have to do research, and all of that kind of carries through in who you are as a person, as a photographer, and through your work. People want to work with you when you take that integrity and due diligence. Like if you work in any of these, in the head offices in Calgary, they talk about due diligence. And as a photographer, I think you need to have that due diligence in your branding and in the work that you do as well. And at the end of the day, it's waking up to the skills that you have. Like I say, how many people in this room have other careers and other education other than photography? Right? So I have a BSc in chemistry. So it has made me pretty well versed in science communication. I've also taken many project management courses, and it has really helped in being able to organize all of my work, being able to pitch, budget, Gantt charts, schedule, all of that. What you see when you see an image, when you see a video, when you see a production, is literally the finished product. You might get a little bit of BTS. But what it takes to actually execute something like that, to get the grants, to get the money to do it, is just like any other industry. And I think when a lot of people that even have all these jobs, they approach photography and see it as this two-dimensional thing, an image that gets you, that's gonna get you your career, this really pretty picture. But in reality, it's so multifaceted that to create a career that is so impossible for me to tell you, oh, this is a roadmap, this is what you're gonna do, and it's gonna guarantee you success. We sell originality, we sell uniqueness in what we do, we sell vision. So how can I teach you that, right? Like, I can't give you my originality because you have to find that yourself. But at the end of the day, for me, it's research. I can read research papers, I can plan. I'm a hiker, I'm a diver. If you look at some of the Nat Geo photographers and you look at their background, they're sociologists. They have incredible degrees, incredibly well-read. They are divers, climbers, you name it. Biologists. They are specialized in what they shoot. And if they aren't, they learn it quite fast. We always say that it's not the camera that takes images, and it's us. But at the end of the day, it really goes beyond even just taking the image nowadays. It is all of you, like everything. If you're an engineer, think of the overrigs and think of the camera traps that you have. A lot of that technology started, or the idea of it started with a guy in his garage fiddling around. And if you think about makeup artists and applying those skills to portrait photography or your ability to make someone bashfully smile, I think we have all these skills that a lot of people don't apply to their photography. But when they think of other career paths, they're throwing everything they have at it. But photography is no different. I think you just need to think outside of the box when it comes to not just your images, but the entire career and business. So I'll show you some of the work that we do and the scope of what we work in. So a lot of these, this is springtime actually in the high Arctic. We typically I camped at 3 different locations, so we're commuting from camp to camp, but the project was about for 2 weeks, so we're camping out there for 2 weeks. What my gear has to endure, the budget, particularly the budget, to be able to do something like this is pretty intense. I usually bring another videographer with me. Brian's in the room right now. He wasn't on this one, but he is on a different one, the summer one. Yeah, I have usually 3, 4 different sponsors. I have short, long-term goals for all of my content in terms of monetization. So yeah, everybody's idea and business model is very different. To tell you the truth, I don't really do prints. I don't do workshops. So I am an outlier when it comes to photography, especially in this sense. A lot of people do prints, they do workshops. I do content creation, I do brand, I do sponsor, and I do licensing. So that is my business model. Very, very different, and I do long and short-term assets. So assets that are selling on the short term that have already been pre-negotiated, it's gonna pay for the trip. Then you have mid-term goals for where you're gonna put the content, pitches that are coming very soon, and then long-term goals, meaning your asset library that is priceless. When you're up in these areas and you have the opportunity, you know that the assets will stand the test of time because it's rare. Like if you get a strange behavior of a bear or a rare behavior of a bear or narwhal, you know that forever you might be the only one that gets something like that and in high quality. So yeah, this is kind of what we do in this springtime. And I'll show you a different shoot. And Brian was on this shoot. And this is summer. So same thing, we're doing 2 weeks, about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. We anticipate risk analysis, how many days we're gonna be landbound, and same within the winter. So 2 weeks, we were probably stuck in the community for a few days. I had missing luggage for about a week. So I think on the ocean, we probably had 3 days, and then we still had, I shot a wedding while I was up there as well for a friend. It got, you start figuring out how you're gonna make and get the connections to get the shots that you need, including community shots. I became really good friends with one of our guys, and that's how we got in with Capik. She's now passed, but she was 100 years old and one of the most like renowned elders in all of Nunavut, actually. She's actually the last surviving bone collector in Canada as well. So I don't know if you guys know what the bone collectors are, but during the wars, World War I and II, Inuit would actually collect bones and animal products and ship them down, and they were used for weapons manufacturing and stuff, for, to support the war. So as you can see, they are high production. Like, I mean, we had to have a boat. I mean, in the springtime, we have snowmobiles, we have camps. Food is a logistic issue. Fuel, it's pretty intense. In this summertime, we have boats. We're pretty much at the whim of weather and condition. When there's rough seas, we're landbound, so then we take the quads out onto the land. We're hiking. And wildlife doesn't always show up. And if wildlife doesn't show up, that's like really hard. It's a really hard, you start worrying about, you know, your assignment and how you're actually going to execute, but you have to worry about what you can get. And maybe you have to go back to get the wildlife. But if you didn't get all the B-roll, all of the other things that you need, and you continually worry about that one image that you need, your entire project's gonna fall apart, right? So just keeping focus and being able to get all of the other B-roll stuff, even though the wildlife might be the creme of the creme for the shoot, I think working with videographers and stuff, that is one thing that has changed how I shoot, and it's increased my productivity and the cohesive nature of my work. So one exercise I would definitely recommend for everybody to kind of improve that without being in a field or anything is watch documentaries. If you have whatever interest you have, if it's Jimmy Chin, if it's, you know, David Attenborough style stuff, watch a documentary and study the frames. Then after it's done, review what you actually need to tell that story in 5 images. And I assure you, it's not like 5 shots of the same thing, like a bear's face, which is like that epic, you know, a portrait or that environmental. It's many, it's a variety of shots leading into what you would say your climatic shot, right? What your images should be editorially, I think, should be the textures in between the text, I always say. Like the things that you want people to feel and understand beyond the words. But it still has to be cohesive enough with the text that's going in your editorial piece, right? So if you're talking about habitat, you can't just have shots of bears and their faces. You still need to show the entire habitat. And particularly if you're a wildlife photographer, whatever wildlife you do film or shoot, I think you should realize that habitat destruction, fragmentation is probably the #1 threat to wildlife, regardless of it being a polar bear and sea ice or orangutans and their forests. And even in Alberta, brown bears and fragmented habitats due to roads, right? So another question I always get asked is lenses, equity and accessibility. So today, I will tell you that what was in my bag before is very different from what my bag is in my bag now, but I did create a career on some pretty, what people would say, ghetto gear. It was like all great gear, but it was all secondhand. And I can tell you that walking into Churchill with a 200 to 500 on a D800, and this is not a long time ago, right? So this is old gear, packed in a duffel bag nonetheless. Walking into Churchill, a lot of the photographers have some of the fanciest lenses that you can see, the newest top of the line bodies, super fast autofocus, all those things. Their bags probably were worth more than my setup. It's intimidating. But nonetheless, I was on assignment. And I think that imposter syndrome within me when I'm there and I'm like, what am I doing, you know? I didn't have what everybody else had, but was I gonna still deliver? Absolutely. And has my my bag changed, but has my standards in what I deliver and what I want to deliver changed? No, that does not change. But how I shoot the high-end gear, it has just made my life a lot easier, right? So what I say to people when it comes to equity is that you can do with less, you need to do more. You learn your gear better, you pre-focus, you do all those things. When you're ready to grow your career, when you're ready to buy more gear, it just becomes so easy. You pick up a mirrorless and you're used to shooting a DSLR with no eye focus, with no super fast lens, no super fast autofocus, and you're pre-focusing everything, you're gonna be, it's gonna be a cakewalk. All you're worrying about is composition at this point, while these guys are trying to figure out their histogram still, right? So I'll tell you what was in my bag before. I had literally the 16 to 35, I think it was 30, 35, 24 to 70, 70 to 300, very, very cheap lens, and a 200 to 500. I had a D750 and a D800 for the most part, and eventually getting a Z7. And nowadays I shoot, the Z7's my third body. I have a Z8 and a Z9. Z9 I use primarily for wildlife, Z8 for hiking and climbing. How I pack my bag is pretty much based on what I'm gonna be doing. I have the 800 millimeter, I have the 180 to 600 because I created my career on a 200 to 500. You know what? I think the 180 to 600 is more than enough for some of the things that I'll be doing. I have the 100 to 400 for bears on rivers. Let me think. The 24 to 70 workhorse, and the 14 to 30. And I was torn. I was talking to some people here about the 14 to 24 versus the 14 to 30. And for me, Astro-wise, yeah, the 14 to 24 would be game-changing, but it is heavier, and the compatibility with the filters is why I chose the 14 to 30, so that I can have that compatibility between my 24 to 70 and the 14 to 30. So it becomes this workflow thing of what is in my bag. Not necessarily the most expensive thing, but what works for me. And to give you an idea of this, secondhand gear, what I was able to achieve, I mean, this was probably the hardest editorial thing to get into with Nat Geo. They literally asked me to submit my RAWs and everything, even just to make it onto their social media. And the diversity, and even when it comes to editorial, you have to realize that this is how big you're printing. The resolution on a Z5, on even a crop sensor, can do this. The resolution on your phone can do this, right? Quite well. You don't have as many controls, but a lot of people have gone above and beyond in everything that they do instead of planning for just right. And when it's one thing if you have all the budget in the world to go above and beyond and you make your life a lot easier, but if you're just starting out and you're saying, I can't start this career because I don't have something, I would say just review back what is it that you want to achieve. If it's editorial, I can assure you that something this big, pretty much any camera here, any camera that you have that you guys are shooting with can do editorial. Take into consideration some of these magazines that a lot of editorial photographers and journalists aspire to be in are like 100 years old. The gear that they were using, that people created their careers on, is less than anything that we have, even from a DSLR perspective. People working with film, with manual focus, imagine all that. So you can do it, it just requires maybe a little bit more work, right? I always say it's like a car. Are you driving from A to B? That's the point of a car. Are you driving a Ferrari or are you driving, average Joe car? You might get there a little bit faster. You might get there with a little bit more style, but nonetheless, you'll get there, right? And on the large side, this is a 27-foot print on a D800 with a 200 to 500. The largest print that I've done for the Canada Goose office is 42 feet. So yeah, you can do a lot. This setup right now probably would cost less than $1,000, okay? So you can get started. Is it going to be easier nowadays for me? Absolutely, to execute this. I will have way less anxiety about printing that big with the bodies that I have today. But can you do it? Yes. It's about a story. It's about image. The number of people that put down their camera for this shot is astounding. And I see way fewer environmental shots because the bear has walked so far away that people are like, oh, it's time for tea time. I'm going to warm up now. And the bear is far. It is really far. Like, it's a dot. But yeah, you stick with it. And you understand, like I say, from a storytelling perspective of your establishing character, looking at environmental shots, detail shots, you understand that at this point, you still have something to do, right? You're still working and that you still have like an image to get. And the other thing is behavioral shots. I think one of the hardest things for particularly wildlife photographers and I think portrait artists is actually getting more than one person, more than one bear. First, it's hard to nail the focus, but B, it's also what they're doing. A lot of people make this mistake of like, okay, they're all clumped together and you get no subjectivity. So you have to understand their body language in the subjectivity of it and also separation. So when I look at what I was doing before and what I'm doing now, one of the biggest things is just getting overwhelmed, like particularly when people see like a walrus colony. It's like, where do I point my camera? And it's like, slow down, analyze what it is that you want, what the scene is like. Are you gonna do a portrait, one animal? Are you gonna do a behavioral shot, an interaction between two animals? Understand the distance between the animal, the shape that they're forming, the subjectivity that you want in your shot. And at the end of the day, I think like you don't necessarily need a clean background to have an impactful shot. I think at the end of the day, you need to have subjectivity. You need to understand that when you look at the photo, that you're not distracted by the background. The background is as strong and as good as the subject that is in the image. Then you don't have to worry about it. I think a lot of wildlife photographers do struggle with the landscape portion of those environmental shots, and therefore the clean background is easier. But when you are able to build depth with foregrounds, backgrounds, and understand how that landscape sets a mood for your wildlife, I think those are the award-winning shots for me, personally. And I think you should be defined by more than the camera that you hold or the tool that you hold. For me, as a photographer, I said, don't ever niche yourself in terms of your skills. For me, I am working on my portrait skills. I've found that everything that I've done, going from landscape to wildlife, and now doing a lot of portraitures. A lot of people think that I get sent up to Churchill on assignments to take pretty pictures of polar bears. I can assure you that there are so many photographers there that are amazing polar bear photographers, better than me. But why do I get the gig? It's partially because I understand the scope of my client, what they need. And it isn't pretty pictures necessarily. It could be oftentimes when people put down their cameras, when a bear is walking into town, when a bear is walking into a dumpster. These are the stories that A, my journalists need, B, my conservation team needs in order to tell the story that that they need to tell. On top of that, I do a lot of portrait work to show what my scientists are doing, them working in the field, explaining the different characters. Like, they become part of characters as well in the polar bear story. I think when you're working with wildlife, and especially in the conservation space, humans are part of every story, be it that we're causing the habitat destruction or we're part of the solution that we're working towards. And I think telling that portion of the story is just as powerful as sharing those pretty images that make people care about the bear or a penguin or anything else. Yeah, it's like that. So I think it is really that I haven't niched myself in a work, in a type of photography. Even though I think right now I am very well known for the Arctic, it wasn't that all the time. At the end of the day, I do talk about wolves and Yellowstone, anything. Don't ever niche yourself in terms of your skill, and nailing that branding, I think, will really show you what that means. Like, A, it shows you what your career should look like or what you want it to look like, but B, that's your demographic, that's your niche. That when I think of niching down, I always think of branding instead of niching down on your skills. People are like, oh, I'm a wildlife photographer and that's my niche. And I don't take photos of people. I don't take photos of weddings per se or events, but I would never say that I can't take a photo, or I don't want to learn how to take a photo of a human. To me, taking a photo of a human to tell a wildlife story is great. I'd love to do that. If I'm on assignment and I have to do a branding or a sponsored thing, I'd more than happy to do portraits of humans. I just don't do baby photos, I think that's more of where we sit the niche, right? Not niching your skills, but niching more your demographic and what you want to do. And mental health and imposter syndrome. Like I say, this job, freelancing, is really not a 9 to 5. It's not a Monday to Friday. Sometimes we're grasping at straws for jobs. That's a reality. Or we're trying to keep our head afloat on another layover to another job, all while having probably enough time to have self-doubt set in. And I don't think that it's necessarily bad to have this imposter syndrome. It's just how you deal with it. When you have imposter syndrome, it means that you're pushing yourself and that you're uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable because you haven't done something before, or you're not confident in your work because you're not there. That means you're growing. It's good. But how you deal with that and how you process that, are you going to shy away? Are you going to not be prepared? How I deal with this is having community. And at the end of the day, I build community through a lot of ways. Social media is a great way. These events are awesome. I think you guys should socialize amongst yourselves as well. Events, camera clubs, photo contests get you seen, and all of that. It kind of leads into when you build your community and your niche, you have those people to call up on. When I don't have a job, my friends are gonna be like, by the way, somebody's looking for somebody, or there's an assignment here, or do you want to join my tour? When I'm drowning in work, there's people that are telling me, you got it, do you need a hand? Here's the help, do you need a fixer? All of those things, right? Your friends really help you out, your community does. If I need another person like Brian, I call him up, hey, can you come out? I have an assignment, I need help. There's lots of Facebook groups. I don't know if you guys operate on this Facebook. In terms of social media, I don't post a ton of photos there, but I am in a lot of groups. And those groups are amazing. There's women in photographers, women in photography, there's wildlife camera women, there's diversified photographers. Highly recommend joining these. Diversified Photographers is American-based, but they pretty much have people from all over the world. They have a roster of lists where editors can literally come and be like, we're looking for a local voice of telling maybe a social issue. We want an Asian, we want Black, we want East Indian to tell this story, photographer to work in this. They will literally have a list of somebody that fits that profile. Women in photographers, wildlife women photographer, camera women one. They even have training. We have like certification programs for training for RED, for diving, for rescue, you name it. So I highly recommend that. Diversify also has grant waiver programs and stuff for photo contests. There's even one group called Happy Nat Geo, and they literally post like editorial opportunities. So definitely get on that. But from a perspective of business, Facebook is really where you connect your sales. We found that anybody who's selling prints, doing workshops, all of that, Facebook is definitely the connector. TikTok and Instagram and YouTube pretty much is sharing who you are, brands, all of that stuff. And LinkedIn profile, professional to professional. So for anything that I need, sponsorships and brands, usually I'm getting it from LinkedIn. And actually LinkedIn, I know it doesn't seem like a photographer world there and more of an engineer and business and all that, but actually you're not competing with as many photographers because they don't know. But the reality is some guy that's on a marketing team somewhere in the ether of marketing, that's where they're looking. And if you have your stuff out there in LinkedIn, you're really not competing with the sea of photographers on Instagram and TikTok. So just a quick tip there. I always look at nonprofits that may need your skill. That could be, rescues or any of that kind of stuff. To me, I know a lot of photographers say, don't work for free. I always think that I've always worked with nonprofits to a capacity where I don't know, it might not be cash, it might not be money in my pocket to pay my bills right now, but I have never worked in a capacity where it never came back to me in a good way, in a way that paid. So keep that in mind, that if you imagine all the brands and who they sponsor, what kind of charities are they doing? There's plenty. For me, Polar Bears International and Canada Goose goes hand in hand. And there's a lot of companies that do great things. And to me, I want to align myself with those brands, but also the nonprofits that I'm passionate about. So I always look at nonprofits. There's rescue centers, there's homeless shelters, there's food banks. They could all use your skills. So I definitely recommend that you guys look into that, and it'll actually likely open doors towards corporate level work as well. A lot of people think that you get into Nat Geo by having a really good image, and there's a handful of people that get in that way. The majority of people actually get in via grants, so it's not easy and very intimidating to write a grant necessarily, like an explorer's grant. But like I say, in some of these communities, on Facebook, they have workshops, they have people helping you, you have questions, you type it in there. There's somebody that's gonna come back and be like, yeah, I wrote this budget, this is how I wrote my budget up, or what do you guys think of this scope, can somebody help me? They have been amazing at that kind of stuff. But look at grants. Canadian Geographic has amazing grants, Nat Geo has amazing grants, as well as like Smithsonian and all those guys. So look at grants, guys. Like, that's how a lot of people are funding their work, getting seen, being published in the publications that you want to be seen in. If you wanted to go into that world of tourism with me, I work a lot with the federal and provincial and territorial tourism boards and outfitters in Canada, but if you want to go above and beyond and be one of those social media influencers, Matador Creators Network always posts jobs. Like, if you join that, they literally send assignments in and then you apply for them. They'll tell you it'll be like Mexico, it'll be Africa, safaris, whatever. So definitely join that one. And I know in recent years, I have seen a lot of portfolio reviews. Have you guys ever done anything like that? So I have a thing about that. Okay, if it's a workshop for portfolio reviews, I definitely recommend, if you're in a workshop, if they ask you, would you like a portfolio review? Absolutely, free critique, awesome. But if you're gonna pay for one online and send your photos in for someone to look at, put it on Reddit. There's gonna be photographers that'll give you their input, A true portfolio review that's really gonna get you seen, it's expensive, way more than the few $100s that you're gonna pay a photographer to look at your work. But if you're at that level where you want to get into editorial, galleries and stuff, New York Times, Santa Fe, some of these you have to actually qualify for. So you'd actually submit a portfolio. They'll tell you that you qualify, and then you have to pay a reasonable amount of money, quite a bit of money, to get seen, to go to this portfolio review. But at the portfolio review, depending on which one it is, it could be Nat Geo, it could be Condé Nast, all of these guys will be there. They'll critique your work, but they're also talent shopping too. So definitely recommend those. So any questions on?
All right, that was fantastic. I have a question for you. Came through email. You mentioned that the photo and the project is the final step, but getting to that, there's a whole bunch of steps to getting that, getting your grant. What particular step is the most challenging for you?
Funding. Funding and ideas. Funding, pitching ideas. I think every project is different, so I think having when you're looking at, a $5,000 versus a $10,000, for example, Alberta. I mean, we do a lot of tourism advertisement. Dollars are flowing into the system, and because of the amount of traffic going through, the companies justify being able to advertise, and they want to advertise everywhere. But where I work in Nunavut, they can only really take on a capacity of maybe 20 people a week, kind of thing, like that's going through their community, and that's housing and everything. So when you're looking at tourism boards there, it's a completely different story, right? So finding branding, sponsor deals, and long short-term goals, very hard.
Sounds good. So we have time for 2 questions while we're still have the live stream going. Then we're going to cut that and just deal with the in-person audience here. So does anybody have a question in the audience here they want to ask? And there's silence. I was going to say, thank you so much for not keeping it really technical and learning sort of a different side of the business that way, which is, it's impressive. It's something people don't think about enough. I mean, we think it's really easy. Just buy the gear, go out and shoot. And you said, yeah, start with what you have, use with what you have, because there's a lot of really good quality gear out there. So, yeah, if we don't have any more questions, we're going to cut the live stream. Thank you so much for joining us online. If you have more questions, don't hesitate. You can give me a shout, just dave@thecamerastore.com, and we'll go from there. And we'll talk to you guys next live stream.